Thank you for attending this press conference on inquiry into the background reasons for the delay of the construction of the Hong Kong section of the XRL. And you will know that this morning we already reported the deliberations of the Select Committee to the Council. The report has also been made public. I suppose you also have a copy. I don't know whether you have sufficient time to assimilate the information contained in the report. But may I suggest that you read the report comprehensively in either language. You should read the whole report thoroughly so that you will understand better the conclusions of the report. I can say that all the key points in the report are intertwined, and we this morning reported to the Council the conclusions the relevant facts and recommendations to the Council, so I'm not going to repeat what I have said in the report to the Council here. So if you have questions, we'll be happy to take your questions. Thank you. So please raise your hand if you have questions, and please state your name and the organization that you're representing. Damon, RTHK.
Ask about the choice of words. Why did the committee decided against condemning any government officials in your report? Thank you.
Sorry, where did you find that information that the committee has refused to condemn anything?
I mean government officials.
Government officials. Why do you say that?
We couldn't find any condemnation in the report.
Well, because there wasn't any suggestion of condemnation in the deliberation of the committee. Because the committee report was drafted by the Secretariat. The Secretariat officers would not suggest condemning whoever, government officials or the corporation or the consultants or whatever. I think, it is up to the individual committee members to suggest a condemnation for the discussion of the committee. But that, I don't think, was done. Well, you can actually see all the suggestions made by committee members for amending the draft reports, and they were all recorded in the minutes of the meetings, and that form part of the report. And you can find out from there what suggestions have been made by committee members in amending the draft report. Okay, it's all there, nothing held back. Okay. Hi.
TVB. In the report, I see that the two former senior officers of the MTRCL have been named for deliberately covering up the delay. However, we also read some criticisms about the Highways Department, but the officers or the government officials concerned have not been named. Why is that? So in relation to the MTRCL, which should be held accountable for deliberately covering up the delay, how should they be held accountable? In our report, we said the Secretary for Transport and Housing, and I suppose everyone knows who we're referring to. The same applies to Director of Highways or the former Director. As for Mr. Chiu and Mr. Walter, one of the conclusions involve these two individuals, so they are named. However, in the report through and through, we have named names, including Professor Anthony Zhang and Mr. Peter Lau. Their names have been repeated again, time and again in the report. The speaker is not coming through. Well, in relation to the monitoring effort of the Director of the Highways Department, which is insufficient, I must say that the whole department should be held accountable instead of just the Director, Mr. Peter Lau. For example, for the Railway Development Office, there is a dedicated project team in charge of the XRL project. There are 8 engineers.
市裏邊係專門負責呢樣嘢嘅，咁變咗嚟講，你係話將即係開名。
So, if we are to name names, if you want to pinpoint the work of Mr. Peter Lau, Director of Highways, himself, the information that we have is that there are inadequacies in relation to the monitoring work of the Highways Department.
係你好啊，咁就有兩方面嘅問題咁。
I have 2 questions. Now, the conclusions in the Select Committee's report differs from the minority report. The major discrepancy lies in the fact that whether the government and the MTOCL have joined hands in covering up the project delay. And your report suggests that the government has not deliberately covered up the delay, but according to information in the public domain, we do see a lack of dissemination of information to the public. So can you explain more clearly to the public about your conclusion? And the second question. Maybe I'll just stop here. About the biggest discrepancy, well, it has to do with the handling of evidence and the perspective, Mr. Chiu, and I mean, as far as the work of the Select Committee is concerned, we have limited information. And before drawing conclusions, the Select Committee considered evidence and information that have been confirmed or ascertained. Now, for the non-disclosure on the part of government officials, some members of the Select Committee are of the view that the failure to disclose all relevant information in the half-yearly progress report amount to deliberate cover-up of the project delay. But we don't think that this is the necessary conclusion, that they're deliberately covering up the delay. And in preparing the report, the majority of the members of the Select Committee believe that there is no evidence to suggest that the government has deliberately covered up the project delay. In relation to the 21st of November 2013, when the government made the announcement or planned to make the announcement of a project delay, the MTRCL's senior management somehow influenced the government's decision, and in the end, no disclosure was made. And you may have heard from the minority report that we're giving benefit of the doubt to the government. But does it mean that we believe that they joined hands in the cover-up attempt? There is no unanimous view among members. Anything to add? I'm sorry, do you mind if we suspend the conference for a while? I think we'll leave Chairman and Deputy Chair here. Giving benefit of the doubt, as you say, whether it is wise to do so, that's another matter. As to whether there is a joint cover-up between the government and the MTLCL, that's another matter. So a follow-up question. The Select Committee did invite Ms. Eva Chang, Mr. Raymond Chin, and Mr. Walder to attend the hearing, and all 4 of them failed to attend the hearings. So how big an impact was there in your inquiry? And also, some members did suggest reprimanding these 4 uncooperative individuals. And in the end, the report expresses or finds it regrettable that these 4 individuals failed to attend meetings. But why not reprimand them?
What is most important is that the Select Committee does not have the powers under Section 9(1) of the Powers and Privileges Ordinance. So we could only invite those individuals to attend and to give evidence. If they didn't want to attend, and they simply refused our invitation, should we condemn somebody who rejected our invitation is a matter of opinion. Also, one thing we must be clear about is that the drafting of this report was done by the Electoral Secretariat. The Secretariat drafted the report based on the conclusions of the internal deliberations of the Select Committee and the opinion of the Select Committees. They have subsequently drafted the report for the committee's consideration. In the preliminary draft of this report, the Secretariat will not proactively suggest to members that they should condemn a certain person or express regret in respect of a certain person. To do that, it would be for a member of the committee to propose and for the whole committee to discuss that, and if it is unanimous, then it will be recorded in the minutes. As you can read from the committee's report, we have already appended the minutes of our internal meetings to, so you can see, you can access or you can find out about all the amendments proposed by members. You can check whether or not any member had suggested we should express any regret. My recollection may not be 100% correct, but as far as I'm concerned, I don't think there have been any such suggestions. Well, the Select Committee, in deciding how to arrive at this conclusion, we had to look at the evidence that we have obtained and look at the facts. And then we will find out whether or not the incident is serious or not, to decide what terminologies we should use. Normally we'll use terms like disappoint, regret, reprimand, strongly condemn, and so on. The Secretariat will look at the evidence collected throughout the inquiry and put forth some recommendations based on our deliberations. The Secretariat may even make some suggestions, but members of the committee can also make comments in respect of the conclusion. For example, we have the opinion that the attitude of a certain person or official is very bad, and that we should sanction him or recommend that the government should punish such a person or impose disciplinary sanctions. That can be done. But in this report, we can see that what had transpired does not warrant our condemning any government officials. And that is why in the report we've used terms like disappoint, or we've pointed out that their performance was not satisfactory. It was all based on the facts. Our conclusions were drawn based on the facts. Shall we give other people a chance to ask questions? You've already asked 2. Of course, there would be an impact, but as to how much the impact is, we don't know how they would perform when they come to answer our questions. So I don't think I can answer this question, which is a hypothetical question. Obviously, there would have been an impact Otherwise, we would not have said in the report that we had encountered some obstruction and that we had to draw our conclusions based on limited information. Sorry, the gentleman is not coming through.
I can only tell you the voting results because I'm not entitled to votes. I can only hold I hold a meeting and I can only decide to make sure that everything is conducted in orderly behavior in an orderly manner. But as far as voting is concerned, I'm not entitled to vote as chairman unless there's a tie. Then I'm entitled to exercise my casting vote in the negative way. I do not have a free choice in casting my vote. Well, I think the Honourable Chen Kam-lim has already said, answered your question that there was a difference of opinion in gauging the seriousness of the behaviour of the officials.
主席，想問下咧，其實關於都係嗰個有冇隱瞞嗰部分啦，其實睇到。
For the MTRC, you've named two persons, Chu Tai-chong and Jay Walder. For the government, you only refer to the department and the bureau. Are you giving the public the impression that you are placing the responsibility on the two senior MTRC officials who have now left the corporation? And as far as the government is concerned, you seem to refer more to the Highways Department than the THB. Are you saying that the department should bear a bigger responsibility than the Bureau? Professor Anthony Cheung, being the superior of the Highways Department, should bear a lesser responsibility? I think the Select Committee can only come to our conclusions based on the evidence we have obtained. I think we've assessed the evidence in a very fair manner before we came to a decision, and that is Mr. Chu Tai-chong and Mr. Jay Walder, as the evidence suggests, that they had actually acted deliberately. As to whether or not we are placing all the responsibility on the two of them, that's not what we've done, but rather the evidence suggests that they are the two persons who should bear the responsibility of deliberately covering up the delay. I'd like to follow up. As one of the members of the Select Committee, we were actually basing our conclusion based on the evidence and the information we have obtained. We arrive at our conclusion and we form our opinion in an objective manner. As the chairman said, it was all based on the facts and the evidence. If a certain person refuses to attend our inquiry, then there's nothing we could do about that. We could only act on the basis of the evidence that we have been given and the facts that we have obtained to make a decision. We had very detailed discussions in the course of our meetings, and different members would put forward different opinion, and also different members will have different justification for the opinion. We've had more than 10 meetings. During our internal deliberations, we are all focusing on the facts. We shouldn't have any subjective opinion. So in the end, after due deliberation, and the chairman had also reminded members as well, unfortunately, at the end, a minority of our members, which in our opinion had decided to come to a different view, although this is not based on adequate facts. as the chairman said, the record is very clear. That is, the committee had conducted its investigation in a fair and transparent manner, and the report was drafted based on those principles. So in the report, you can see that different different opinion of members as to whether or not they were based on objective facts. I think you can find out, in the relevant paragraphs.
Well, as Deputy Chairman just put it very clearly, this is a select committee set up with members being public officers and protected by the electrical PNP ordinance, and we therefore needed to handle the evidence in a fair and impartial manner. Because we're in a more privileged position, we need to make sure that we will not give any unfair treatment to anyone else. And our conclusions are drawn on a basis of sufficient evidence and information. Well, the journalist just repeated his question regarding the director, the secretary, well, whether they should be apportioned a greater degree of responsibility if their names appear more frequently in the report. I need to emphasize that we need to collect and analyze evidence objectively, and we mustn't include our subjective opinion in the Select Committee's report. As for the roles played by the government officials, their responsibilities respectively, and their involvement in the matter, and we needed to consider these matters very carefully. The Highways Department had more to do with the day-to-day operations, so naturally more evidence would be focused on the Director of Highways. I don't think that the report seeks to show the extent of responsibilities to be borne by different government officials. We're just trying to find out, and we did set out the roles and functions of individuals, and based on the evidence collected, we then have drawn up conclusions objectively, and we have been careful in our diction. And I emphasize once again that we have not included our subjective opinions in the report. We have acted with prudence in fulfilling our duties as members of the Select Committee. Well, I sort of have a railway background, and I'm a member of the Select Committee, and I support the report. I signed the report. So in short, may I share with you the following. Well, in the course of our work, there are some salient points. That is, in relation to site investigation, whether the MTRCL has acted diligently, and the City Golf Club had operated on that site for 11 years. And for short-term tenancies, as we all know, at most, only 7 years should be granted. So even back in 2006, the corporation should have requested the government to stop granting extension of the short-term tenancies for site investigation. So in 2009, when they reported to the council and applied for funding, they would have known the ground conditions very clearly. They failed to make that request at the time, and they signed the entrustment agreement with the government whilst failing to take this step. So I think that they could do something about it, but they were not committed. That's because of the entrustment agreement. They were not responsible for the risks, And I think we're clear that Mr. Chiu Tai-chong was very clear about the matter, and Mr. J. Walder just put his faith in him, and he was clearly aware of the situation. In August 2013, when they made a report to the council, they told us that for the terminus, well, the construction of B4 had commenced. And then later on, they said that the construction only reached B3. And I think it's grossly misleading, as you can see in the report. What about government's supervision? The government checks the checker. So whilst the corporation is the checker, the government is playing the role of checking the checker. So in paragraph 7.51, I suggest an amendment be made, and that is to show that the government has unreasonably trusted the checker. So instead of checking the checker, the government only trusted the checker. Because the M&V consultant reminded the government repeatedly. And yet we should understand, we should know that this is not a deliberate cover-up, because as far as construction projects are concerned, delays can be recovered. If a project manager says that he's confident that the delay can be recovered, then unless it's based on data, it's based on empirical evidence, it's hard to rebut the argument. I've been in the business for so long. So I'm talking about recovery measures. There are recovery measures that can be implemented. And this does happen. So in November 2013, based on the corporation's report, saying that on the northern side, the construction of B4 had commenced, and then the terminus would be built all the way up. There was no reason not to trust the corporation, and that's the nature of the entrustment agreement. When the principal doesn't have a big team to oversee everything, the principal will have to entrust an agent. And you need to give the project manager the benefit of the doubt if he says that the delays can be recovered. And I think this is what the Secretary was trying to say, giving the benefit of the doubt to the corporation. And we only subsequently found out that, in fact, B4 had not yet been reached. And for a whole chunk of the construction work, in fact, the whole methodology was wrong. And yet it doesn't mean that we believe that they were deliberately covering up anything. Now, I also like to emphasize that our conclusions are drawn based on facts. For the serious delays and cost overruns of the XRL project, these show the poor governance of the MTLCL. On the 16th of April 2014, the board of the MTLCL first became aware of the delay. And in paragraph 5.36 of the report, I also make this point. So the Select Committee is of the view that the corporation's board, in the handling of the matter, startled us. We find it startling from a corporate governance perspective, and that is the basis of drawing this conclusion. Any other questions? Oh, Dr. Loy Kwok. I think the media may be very concerned about our report, and I think that you should note part 3, and that is Chapter 7, Conclusions. Now, in relation to the EA2's inadequacies under the concession approach, leading to the inadequacies identified on the part of the government and the corporation, we have made our conclusions, and as mentioned just now, all our conclusions are based on facts. There are references to different paragraphs where facts are laid out. About the respective responsibilities of individuals and the wording to be used, I don't think this is the focus. You should focus on our conclusions and also recommendations in Chapter 8. We hope that we can come up with some concrete recommendations so that the project can be improved.
Economic Times. I'd like to ask a question regarding the 4, crucial individuals who did not attend the hearing. Mr. Wu Chi-wai had also suggested that you should invoke the Powers and Privilege Ordinance to obtain important information papers and to summon witnesses. At that time, Mr. Wu's proposal was rejected. To some extent, do you think the members also had a responsibility here? I mean, resulting in the persons concerned not attending the inquiry, and as a result, your report is not complete. I think most importantly, the veto was a veto made in the council. He did raise the issue at the House Committee and also the Railway Select Committee. So that was at the time we could not foresee that there would be a petition to come later, and that the select committee would be set up later on, which will not be empowered by the Powers and Privilege Ordinance. And although 4 persons did not attend the hearing because they've either left Hong Kong or have retired, or most of the people invited to attend by the committee did attend. For those who did not attend, there were other people in their place to attend and to provide evidence. Although we didn't, those 4 persons were not present, we still were able to obtain sufficient evidence to help us discharge our duty as a select committee. Chairman, in the report, you refer to Mr. Tew and Mr. Wilder and shortcomings. Since they've already left the corporation, do you think that personally they have to shoulder any responsibility? Because in the report, we can see clearly that they have actually been at fault, but still they were able to collect their gratuity payment and leave the jobs. So shouldn't there be a system to make them bear the responsibility? And how could the MTRC, what should the MTRC do to make sure that they bear the responsibility? Well, it is not within the terms of reference or the scope of our investigation as to who should be held responsible, because they are former senior management staff of the MTRC. So I think we should leave it to the MTRCL to decide on how this issue could be addressed. I think we should defer to the MTRC to make that decision. Cable TV. The report said that the MTRC has to be responsible for its behavior. So as far as this incident is concerned, how do you think the MTRC should be responsible? Well, if you've read our entire report, you'll see that we did not look at the legal liability of each corporation or individual. So to say that they have to be responsible, we mean that they should be morally responsible for what had happened. Mr. Chair, Deputy Chairman already said that the MTRC lacks an effective monitoring mechanism. So we have a problem with with their corporate governance. So that is the extent to which they should be held responsible. Sorry, I couldn't hear your question. Could somebody pass the mic to the gentleman, lady? Moral responsibility. Do you have anything in your mind as to how you can make the corporation being morally responsible? The committee has not discussed that. In that case, does it mean that your recommendations actually amounts to nothing? There's no pressure you can apply on to the corporation. Well, it is not the duty for the committee to exert pressure. Our duty is to find out the truth and to report to the council. Chairman, actually in the report of the committee as whether or not we should put pressure on the corporation or of course, this report is disclosed to everyone. When the committee makes its final conclusion, it has to take in consideration different factors, and the conclusions are all based on facts and not on the personal opinion of members. And we've already, outlined all those facts. If the MTRC read the report, I'm sure they will be concerned about the relevant parts. And I think it's the same in respect of the other reports. Even for this select committee, even if we were given the authority under the Powers and Privileges Ordinance, I think nobody would have to bear responsibility pursuant to our report. There could perhaps be some political pressure, but it is not a mission given by the Select Committee to itself. Whether the person who is being criticized feels the pressure, it would be up to them. It's not something we need to consider. I think you can look at our recommendations in Chapter 8, Recommendation 1 and 2. The first recommendation is about improve institutional arrangements, and recommendation 2, improve the corporate governance of the MTRC. Perhaps you stay on to see whether you have any other questions.
I realize there's a difference between the two reports. The first report mainly about the recommendation and the fault, and then the minority report is more of the responsibilities of different parties. Is there a consensus of how do you move forward, whether it's just moving forward with the recommendation, or you're just going to seek responsibility of different parties and then see what you can do to prevent a further delay in the 2018 third quarter deadline?
In a way, the report is what the events that are covered by the reports are a little anachronistic now, because we are only investigating the question of delay up to April 2014, and we do not look further into any possible further delay after April 2014. So, what you said is basically not within the purview of the Select Committee, because we do not look into ways to prevent further delay. That's not within the terms of reference of the Select Committee. Thank you.
好，大家有冇其他提問？如果冇。
Any further questions? If not, then I think we will end our press conference here. Thank you very much. I'd like to emphasize that you shouldn't just look at a single sentence in our conclusion. Everything in the report is based on facts. I think the earlier part will explain how we obtain our evidence, so that can help you understand how we arrive at our conclusions.